All right. Hi, everyone. I hope you're starting to join us now. It's 4 o'clock and we're ready to go with our webinar for today. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Eileen Roxby. I'm the principal of the Remote Learning Academy for Fairfield Public Schools, and we're really happy that you could join us today. We also have our first grade and kindergarten teachers, our language arts consultant, and our educational program facilitator on the chat with us as well. And so we will give you a chance at the end to ask questions. So I'm going to do a lot of talking up front and a lot of presenting, but please know that your questions will be answered at the end. So one of the things that I'd like to start with is a quick introduction about myself. I was a reading consultant way back when, and so I've had a lot of experience in early childhood, especially reading. That was my forte. I taught for a lot of my career in kindergarten and first grade, so this is my wheelhouse. But to start with early reading development, it started way back when, and as you see the picture, a child sitting on your lap reading a book, that's where it all begins. That children learn to love books. They learn to love that this is a special time. They're looking at pictures. We're talking about words. We're pointing to things. They're starting to notice the things that are part of a book. But for our early readers that are just learning how to read, there's a lot of things that you can do at home with them. And besides having great books available, which we know we are lucky that you have, but we also know that you can get those books from us at Fairfield Public Schools. We are doing book pickups this week and next week for all of our students to come and get some books so they can have those books in their hand to learn how to read with. And you can also access our school libraries and the public library for books at any time. So please, the more books, the better, as we know. But we're talking today really about how you can help at home. And the way children learn how to read is probably one of the most fascinating things that, you know, as a parent and as a teacher for us to see. It's an incredible journey when your 5-year-old looks up at you and says, I can read. So some of the things that we do in school and some of the things that you can do at home are just on this screen. If your child gets stuck on a word when they're looking at a picture, just say, hey, listen, check the picture first. And then make the first sound of the word. And then if you want to reread it and think about it, does that make sense? And if they're still struggling, then you can tell them the word. So these are the things that you probably have heard over and over again as you've been listening into the lessons the teachers have done. Look at the picture. Does it sound right? Does it look right? Does it make sense? Those are the things that we really work with our kids on as an early reader. We want them looking at the pictures. We want them understanding that the pictures help the words make sense and that the words should be there. Some of the early things that you can do is also count the words on the page. That's one of the things that we find really important for getting the kids to notice the print. Once we get them to look at the pictures, now we want them looking at the print. And one of the best ways we do that is have kids really count the words on the page and look at the words on the page and touch the words as they say them. And then we can say, did that match? Did those words match the words that you said? And then you go back and check the picture. So if your child makes a mistake when they're reading and when we're going into those really very early books that have maybe 1 or 2 words or 3 words on a page, let's check that. Does it make sense? If you're looking at a book, say, of a ball on a page and the child is bouncing the ball and you're saying, what does this say to us? It's like a ball. And great. And how many words would that be? 2 words. Let's count them. A ball. Great. So you want that to make sense. You want it to look right and you want it to check. So those are some of the things that you do very early on in those very beginning A-level books. Here are some of the things that we talk about a lot. one-to-one matching is very important at this stage. We want the kids to be able to match the words with the print, as I said. We also know that the pictures are very important at this point because they are relaying the meaning. These books are developed specifically to get kids to understand that the words should match the pictures. And then if you can find some words, we want them to be able to find words they know. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the sight words, because that's pretty important. And then we look for patterns in books. And if you look at the very early reading books that we give you to learn how to read in kindergarten, there are usually patterns. I can see, I can play, I can walk. Those are the kind of patterns that you normally would see in a very early reading. And a lot of parents sometimes say, but my child isn't really reading, they're memorizing the book. That's something that kind of comes up in our conversations a lot at this stage. But what they're doing is knowing that the books have a pattern, and the books usually have a pattern change at the very end, which then allows the child to start to use different strategies in thinking. So those are the kinds of things that you'll notice in those very early books. We also want kids to really look for words they know, and that's where the sight word comes in a lot. So some of the things that we do for kids in the beginning, as you know, is we give them those very easy words to learn, those high frequency words that come up in text all the time. We want children to kind of develop an automaticity with those words, but it also helps them gain confidence as a reader because they see the words that they know in the print and they're like, hey, I can read. And just this past weekend, my granddaughter was over and she's in kindergarten, and I had some early readers, and we just put them out and we started to reading. And she was able to read a very simple book called I Can See. And so at the end, she just turned around and said, I'm a reader. And when she went home, the first thing she said to her mother, did you know that I learned how to read at Mimi's house? So it's gaining the confidence of the kids as a very big part of early literacy. And part of that is understanding that they can own these words. I know that word is I know that word is me. I know that word is you. I know that word is like. So it's really important for them to get those words known. So one of the things that you can, does it look like a word you know, is another way to help kids with unknown words. And then we also, reading is comprehension. That is the crux of reading, right? So if you look here, predict what would make sense. And sometimes when you're looking at a picture, and it could be two words. For example, if a child is eating a peanut butter sandwich, just say, but in the picture they don't say that, but your child says peanut butter sandwich, then you could say, let's count the words. It says, I can eat. Doesn't say sandwich. So they have to really look, do you see a word that you may know? Sandwich wouldn't be a word, that would be a long word that they know, but is there a smaller word that they might know? And again, these are the things that we want to do. We want to give them confidence in those very early stages of reading. A lot of children approximate in the beginning, and that's okay. As you know, when you have a toddler and they want to read a book to you, they always just tell the story as if you were reading the book to them. That's an approximation. And we want our students to be able to approximate, but when we're learning how to read, we also want them to pay attention to the print. And that's the difference between moving from that very early, like, approximation stage to being actual accurate readers. So it's pretty important for them to look at those words, count those words, and connect to the words that they already know. So as the kids get up in levels and they start reading a little bit more, we start to change a little bit of what we're asking them to do. We don't necessarily want them to point to the words as much anymore. We want them to really keep their eyes on the print. We try to lean them away from using those crutches, but we want them to use it as long as they need it. But we definitely want to keep the children rereading to make sure it makes sense. And then here's where you can help parents at home is One of the things that we hear a lot of parents saying is sound it out. And so for a kid who's learning the phonetic system, sometimes they don't know what to do to sound it out. So what we do is tell them to look for the parts that they know. And for that's part of where we're going back to the sight word in knowing the knowledge of the sight words, but also the things that they're learning in word work. And that's the rhyming words that we work on, those pattern words like cat, pat, sat. Those are the things that you'll see in the word work that we're trying to get kids to know, that there are parts of words that are always staying the same, and that we can move things around and change the word. But we know this part very good. At, we know at, and we can make lots of words with at. So if you're showing them parts that they know, you can put your fingers around the parts that they might know and ask them to now see if they can figure that word out using the beginning sound and the part they know. So we call, those are, it's called onset and rhyme in the fancy reading world, but that's how we do it, is really building on their knowledge of what they already know. If your child still struggles, you can always just tell them the word and move on, and don't make a big deal out of it, because what we want them to do is stay confident in their reading in the beginning. And if you want to just ask them to say, did that word make sense? Let's look at the picture. Let's make sure it looks right and sounds right and makes sense. So if you keep using those words over and over again, those are the things that the teachers say. Those are the things that you can say at home to help your child. So again, we're moving away from that finger pointing. We want the children to start to read with their eyes. Again, we're looking at the structures that are in the words that we know. In reading, there are three structures. It's meaning, visual, and syntax that we're always working on with our students. So we want to make sure that they're able to know that all those three things have to work together for them to make sense of the book. And when children are doing all of those three systems together, then they're really accurately reading, and they're reading fluently, and they're learning how to read. And those are the things that teachers look for all the time. If you've ever seen a teacher sit down with a student doing little checks called a running record, that's what the teachers are checking for, to make sure that the students are using all of their systems in place that will help them become a fluent reader. So those are the things that we do all the time as teachers, and these are the things that you can do at home to help. Again, does it look right? Does it sound right? Does it make sense? Those are the things that we do all the time. And then we want the kids to start to reread. If they make a mistake and say, there's a little problem there, why don't you reread it and see what happens if you can figure that out. So as we move up in our stages of reading, now we can start asking them some more complex things that they can do. So one of the things, if a student is having some difficulties with words, you can, again, cover the unknown part and go back to that small part that we know. That helps them a lot. We also ask students to look at the beginning of the words, the end of the words, to try to figure things out. So those are, again, some of the things that we're like trying to get the kids to really use their knowledge of words when they're reading. And telling them or asking them to sound it out doesn't really help sometimes. But looking at the parts you know is really important. What you do for modeling fluency, as you see here on the next chart, is just reading with them. And some of the strategies that you can do is having your student read one page and you read the next page, and then your child read the next page and you read the next page, and you can demonstrate fluent reading. That's a great way to kind of get your kids hearing that fluent reading and what it should sound like. Using those crazy voices when you see an exclamation point, and when there's a word that's bold-faced, and using your voice to emphasize that word. It shows the students that we pay attention to those kinds of things when we're reading. It's important for us to understand the story, because again, comprehension is reading, right? That's what we want. And then some of the things that we ask the kids to do when we're and grade above their level, to them, which is why teachers always read to students, because we want to develop their language of books, so that when they see them in print, they would have heard them first. And so those are the things that we do all the time. That's why the shared reading is such an important part of our reading program. We really want to be able to push them farther by hearing the vocabulary of a book and the cadence of a story, so kids know when something doesn't sound right when they're reading. So those are some of the things that we try to move our students from the beginning of reading all the way through to being able to sit down independently to that chapter book. And that's like the big crown of glory at the end of first grade, when kids get that chapter book in their hand. Then they really feel like they have accomplished something. And that's why those early little books that you can get, the series books, are fantastic. You're looking for holiday presents. Early reader series books are great, because it builds confidence in the kids, because they know the characters, they know what to expect, they know the cadence and the structure of the book, and it really gets them engaged into that reading very nicely. So if we're getting up there in our kids are now, they have learned how to read, we may have some of our first graders at the end of the year really getting into those books where they want to get into the series. Again, we're keeping the prize on comprehension, because that's what it's all about. We're thinking about all the things that we've done in the beginning about words, as now the words are getting bigger. Instead of just a part of a word, we may be looking at two words together for compound words. So we're really, the structures that we're go from the known to the unknown with them is important, to use the places, the parts they know, to move on. And if you need to help them, then show them. Show them how words are put together. Prefixes, suffixes, root words, all of those things. ING words, those are a big part of first grade for sure. Kids love to do those action words, and it becomes part of their writing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that connection at the end. And if your child, as we build that reading vocabulary, and your child is not sure of word meanings, this is a great place to teach them, right? Synonyms and antonyms and things like that, all of those things that you can kind of put together with them, using the books, using your knowledge, and talking. So this is what teachers do every day. And since you are now the teachers at home a lot of the time, because of this crazy world right now, we know that you're putting on a teacher hat, and hopefully today you'll come away with some little teaching strategies that you can use with your children at home. So again, as the kids are getting up in the books, you can kind of back away from that beginning, does it look right, sound right, and make sense? And you can start to say, something wasn't quite right. You made a mistake there. Can you go back and see if you can find what happened? And get them in the habit of rereading. We call this self-correcting a lot. We want children to realize, as they're reading and comprehending, that something didn't sound right, didn't make sense. I have to stop and I have to go back. And that's a habit a lot of the kids don't like to do. That's not a fun thing for them to do, because they just want to get finished with the book. But if we start now in the early development of reading and really make that something that they need to do as a reader, that's a good habit to get into, because it makes them become a better reader as the content increases, as the grades get higher. So we really want to make sure that they realize that wasn't right, and I've got to go back and fix it. And so as the parent teacher at home, you can say, wait a minute, I think there wasn't something right there. Maybe you should go back and see what happened, and kind of get them in the habit of doing that themselves. And then when we have them reread to confirm, that's a great thing. We really want them to say, yeah, I did this, I found it, I fixed it myself. And sometimes they can't fix it themselves because it's a really unknown word. And that's where you can come in with, again, that support with, is there any part that you know in that word? I think you might know this part, and you can put your fingers around it, and then you can work forward or backwards from there. And again, as the kids get up in writing, in reading, we like to have them make predictions about stories. That's one of the things I haven't talked about yet, and that's part of our early development as well. We always have the students realize that there's a beginning, middle, and end of the story. And this connects into when we get into writing as well. We like to know that there's characters, right? There's settings, there's places. There's usually a problem, and then that problem gets fixed. So we get the kids thinking about that all the time when they're reading, so that they realize that they can make a prediction. And so predictions, if you've ever listened to one of the teachers do a read aloud, a lot of times they're asking, what do you think is going to happen in the story? And why do you think this is going to happen? And did you notice the character? And what kind of character traits do the characters have? We talk about these things with the students all the time when we're reading in our read alouds and our shared reading. And this is something that we want them to know when they're reading as well, that they can do that as a good reader. They can start to reflect on, this character is doing this. I think this is going to happen. Or they're in this setting, or the weather is like this. I think this is going to happen. So we want them to start to make those predictions as they go along, because that really, as you know, as a reader, you're reading a novel and all of a sudden you think, I think I know what's going to happen. And sometimes we're right and sometimes we're not. But that's what good readers do. They're constantly thinking about the text. And again, that's the big picture of reading, is the comprehension. Like, what is happening? I'm not just looking at words, and I'm not just looking at pictures. I'm thinking about a story. I'm learning something about this character, or as they start reading nonfiction books, I'm learning something about this object or this place or this thing that I'm reading about. So that's pretty important. So here's some more strategies for you. Talking about the self-correction, monitoring reading for fluency. That's where you come in, again, reading to them, making it sound like talking. We say that a lot to kids, like, make it sound like talking. And if they need to figure it out, ask them, what could you do to help yourself? What can you try? Let them know that they can do something, that it's not just up to you to turn. And we see this all the time when we're working with kids. They'll turn and look at you like, I'm stuck. Help me. And so as a parent, I'm sure the first instinct is, I want to get in and I want to help you and I want to tell you the word, or I'm going to just say, sound it out. But we want them to try the strategies themselves. So the more that you can get them to say, what can you do? What strategy could you use? The more that they will get used to doing that, instead of just saying, I know if I wait long enough, somebody will help me. So we don't want that to happen. So we talked a little bit about the sight words and how important they are, that automaticity, and that's something that you can easily do at home with your kids. I think it's a fun thing that you can do. We don't put a tremendous amount of emphasis on it, but we know that there is a lot of confidence building that happens when students really get to know the words that they're going to see frequently over and over again, in especially in our early books. And so having fun with words is also a wonderful thing to do. Playing with them, making words that rhyme, all of those great things that we do with our toddlers. It really affects their early reading, because we know that language is so important in the development of reading. So the more you can do with that, certainly is the better. So we talked a little bit earlier about reading and writing, and I'm sorry I'm doing a lot of talking, but I promise I'll give you time to ask questions. But there's a lot of connection between reading and writing. That's why we call it language arts, because it's especially in the beginning of reading and writing, it's very difficult to separate what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? Because we're doing it simultaneously. And we know that to build a good foundation, you have to have a great phonetic system in place. And there has been for a long time this whole thing about phonics and reading and students, and schools not teaching kids phonics. Well, we in Fairfield, we certainly do believe that students need to learn their phonics, and they need to know the letters and sounds and how they work together, and that phonological development is extremely important um, for students to read and write. But we also know that approximations are the gateway for teachers to know what kids are actually learning and transferring. So when we are writing with students, and when we are developing that sight vocabulary, and when we're reading books with lots of rich words and vocabulary, we want the students to think about those words and learn that an author has written this, and I can do that because I'm an author. And so the connection between reading and writing, you cannot separate it. We want students to be able to say, did you notice what the author did in this book, and how they use these words, and how they set up the character and the setting and the problem? We want students to notice those things so they can put that into their own writing. And the more that we read, the more that they get experience as what an author can do, and the more that they feel like, as an author, I can do the same thing. So when it comes to inventive spelling, which I just saw a typo in there, which I will fix. Inventive spelling is the approximations of, I know these words and I know sounds and I can put them on paper and I can write a story. And for our kindergartners, it's kind of an interesting concept, because we know kids want to write from the very beginning. They want pens, they want to scribble. Think of your toddlers, how they wrote all over everything and approximated what they saw you doing, and they wanted to do that. And so when we want kids to write stories, we want them first to tell us the stories, so they know that, oh, okay, this makes sense. I have a beginning, a middle, and end. It makes sense to someone who's going to read it. It's going to be something that I can do. And we start with pictures. We want them to have great pictures. We want them to use the pictures to tell the story, which we do in reading. Look at the pictures. The pictures tell the story. And so when we're starting to write, we want the children to draw the pictures, because that's starting to tell the stories. Then we want them to start to add words. And they can add words that they know, which is their sight words, or they can use sounds that they know to approximate the words that they're going to do in their story. So one of the things we like to do is, especially when we're writing together with students, is we think of an idea, we look at a picture, we'll draw the picture, and then say the sentence out. So a lot of times the pictures are connected to, obviously, what they're doing in their life. So I played with my sister, for example. So how many words are in that sentence? I played with my sister. Oh, good. Let's start with I. Do you know the word I? Yes, sure, they do. Kids always know the word I. My, they do. You, sometimes they just put the letter U. So we know that, try to get them to write whatever they can write. I played with my sister. So they write the word I, then we would say, well, what do you hear for played? And they might put PLD. That's okay. They don't know that word yet. They may have seen it in a book. They certainly haven't learned it in kindergarten at the moment in our word work, but they certainly know that word is going to come up a lot, and they're going to want to know that word. But right now, if they know PLD, we're going with PLD. With could be just a W. My might be a sight word, and then sister, STR probably, if you're lucky. Maybe just an S. And then we always say, as we notice in books, we put a period at the end. So those are the really very basic early reading, writing connection pieces that we do. There's so much more that we do when we're doing shared readings. We notice patterns. We notice how authors play with words. Those loud words, onomatopoeia, sound words. Kids love that when they learn that word. Then they'll overuse something that they like. First grade is a big overuse of word. in writing. Once they learn a strategy, they tend to overuse it and overuse it and overuse it, because it makes them feel good and it makes them feel successful. And so those are some of the things that you might see in the beginning of writing. But one of the things that we ask is that you let them use that inventive spelling and make those approximations, because it lets the teachers know what they're transferring from what they're being taught and where they may need support. So it's really, I know it's hard to sometimes look at that and say, I don't even know what that is, but believe me, the kids can usually read it. And kindergarten and first grade teachers are experts at reading a string of letters that make a story. And I know it's maybe something that you're not used to seeing at home, but we certainly are definitely used to that. And it really is a wealth of knowledge for us to know where our instruction needs to go next, because we need to know what's being transferred from reading to writing and what the kids are trying to do with their spelling. It helps us get into their phonological world. So it's very important to let them make those approximations, try out some little fun strategies that they're learning in books. And again, going from that picture to the sentence to a paragraph, and all knowing, connection back to, we know we need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We need to have some kind of a connection. And then when we're writing about nonfiction, how are we teaching somebody? What vocabulary would they need to know? All of those things that we notice in books first, and then transfer to reading. So here is just some of the charts that you probably have seen. I just took this from one of the first grade teachers. You may have seen different charts, but always with the same kind of sentiments on them. Check the picture, get your mouth ready, look for the parts you know, skip return, all of those wonderful things that we kind of talked about earlier. And these are some of the visuals that go along with that you can certainly use at home. So this presentation will be on YouTube, but it will also be on our webpage, so you can refer back to it and look for these things at home for you to use. That's why we put them on here. Again, does it look right? Make sense? Take the ending off. Again, looking for the parts you know and adding the parts that you don't know, making those words bigger. Run into the beginning using the digraphs and the blends that we learn along the way in our word work. How do we put them all together in reading words? Slide and cover is another strategy. Cover up the beginning, slide over and see if you can read it. That really takes the place of sound it out. We want them to look at the words instead of trying to sound it out. Let's look for parts we know first and then slide it and see how it goes. And then, of course, just the vowels, which you all know, and we use all the time with the kids, that they have to know what the vowels are. They have to know the sounds, and but not in isolation, in the context of a word. So we start from the singular to the plural as it goes. Here's some other of the word work that you'll see. Those familiar parts of words, the chunks that we call them, the students learn. If you can play with those words, making those rhyming words over and over again, kids love that. It's something that's fun for you to do at home, and it certainly is something that we do in school all the time. But as their home teacher, you can certainly do those fun little games with those rhyming words. And then this is the blend chart that we usually use here for you to kind of look at. So I talked a lot. So Leslie Davis is in the chat room with you, and certainly if you have any questions, this would be a great time to ask them. And so we'll go with any questions. So Leslie, if you have anything out there, let me know. Well, while we're waiting, I do see that Lynn Holcomb is on, and Lynn is the director of literacy and learning for the elementary schools for Fairfield Public Schools. So welcome, Lynn. Do you have anything to add that you'd like to add for the parents today?
So I think Claire, you really walked through the important parts of early literacy that we need to pay attention to. But I'd love to hear the questions and see if we can maybe bring some other things out that parents have questions about.
Yep.
Hi, everyone.
Right now, I'm not seeing, right now we don't have any questions in our chat, so we'll just wait a second and see if anybody pops up. This is a good time to ask if you have any specific questions about literacy and working with your little ones at home. Here's one. What is the end of year letter goal for kindergarten? I'm assuming we're talking about an F&P letter goal for a running record or for an independent reading level.
I assume so. It's still a D, I assume. Yep. We want them to get to a level D. So level D books are really they're patterned books. They have they go from 1 line to 2 lines, perhaps even to 3 lines of text, and there's usually lots of sight words in there that kids know, but also there are challenging words in there too for them to start to use some of the systems that we're developing. But nothing that's not taught in our curriculum certainly is not expected outside of a D. So our level Ds are the expectation. And just for parents to know, with all of the experience that I have in teaching kindergarten, the beginning of reading is sometimes you hold your breath, right? You kind of go, oh gosh, is it going to come? And then usually in March, and the kindergarten teachers here can attest to that, I'm sure. By March, all of a sudden, it's like an explosion where everything seems to come together for a kindergartner, and they really start to put all of it together beautifully. The reading comes together, the writing comes together, but it takes a lot of play with words for kids to feel that confidence. And some kids innately are born with that eye for phonics and put the systems together really quickly. And for other kids, it takes a little bit more time. They still are having some difficulty with just the sounds of an A or a B without a word connected to it. And so once they figure that out, and they figure out that, oh, there's these 2 letters together, AT, make a word, and I can change it with this, the magic happens. So we call it making and breaking words, and that's like a fun game for kids. And once they figure all of that out, how words move around and how words can change, they start to go, I get it now. So it does sometimes takes a little bit longer for some kids, and some kids get it right away, but usually by March, everybody's off and running beautifully, reading books, and they'll blow you away. Absolutely. If the kindergarten teacher wants to jump in with any of their words of wisdom as well, but go ahead.
We have another writing question too, if we don't. So
sure.
When I pause, I just want to make sure if kindergarten teachers are jumping in, it takes a moment just so the parents know to unmute and be able to talk. So I just want to give them a second. But this next question has to do with writing. It's a great one. We hear a lot. It says, my son has trouble with choosing a topic to write. We spend 15 minutes or more every day just thinking about a topic. Do you have any suggestions for helping him to choose his topics?
That is a great question. And that's why we have writer's notebooks. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have a writer's notebook, I would say get one of those black and white composition books or a special journal. To make it even more fun. One of the strategies we do is have kids decorate that journal with cutting out pictures from a magazine, things that excite them. So if they want to build their cover of their writing journal with pictures that they cut out of Legos or dolls or balls or hockey or whatever is their interest, it kind of makes them have something right there all of a sudden. So if you make it like, this is your idea book, what do you like? Let's make it about what you like and start there. So if you decorate their book and then just have them write ideas down, like what's a great thing that you might want to write about. You know a lot about soccer because you're a soccer player. Like could we write about soccer? Sure. What words could we write about soccer? What words would we need to do? And make like a little word list with them. You can do that. Sometimes if you're doing something, if you're baking with your kids, and something happens and an egg falls on the floor and everyone's laughing, you can say, you know what? You could write about this. We call those small moments. And small moments happen every day in every life, especially things that make kids laugh or make kids cry. Because when there's emotion connected to it, they remember it, right? So building those kinds of ideas in everyday moments help kids remember, oh, yeah, you could write about that. That would be a funny story. I think the kids in your class would like that. Any silly things like that happen in your life, anything that they like, those are the places that we usually try to start. So that's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add that too, because I know having that list handy in their area where they're working every day, right? So that it's just so accessible. We all know that if a child's unwilling to write or it's a difficult subject for them, they're going to avoid it in any way they can. So if I can talk to mom about a topic for 15 minutes, then I will, or get started. So sometimes we'll set a little bit of a time limit too, right? Like we're going to think of a topic in the next 4 or 5 minutes. I'm going to set a timer, and then we're going to get started writing. One of Ralph Fletcher, who does a lot of writing for kids, one of his biggest strategies that I find works really well, especially when kids have a hard time getting started, is just writing the first word. Write a word. Now write another word. Now write another word. And it's painstaking, but then they eventually start to get started. Sometimes it's just that getting started. And so giving them a goal of 2 lines on the page or 3 lines on the page just to get them started sometimes just sort of unleashes it too. So if they're stuck, that's another way to just getting them started once they discover that topic too.
Yeah. Thank you. Any teacher want to jump in with any great strategies that you have?
I just wanted to add that a default for a lot of kids when I've worked, especially if they're really stuck, is I always tell them write a boo-boo story, because almost everybody has a boo-boo story. And sometimes that just, I mean, as Mrs. Roxby was saying, it connected to emotion, like it's usually very vivid in their mind. So sometimes when I'm working with a new group of kids, I tell them all to write the boo-boo story, and everyone can produce something.
Great. Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah, we'll have to, Mrs. Riucci is saying, thank you so much. They've been using the composition book, but having that list handy to work from is so such a great suggestion for them. So glad that helps. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask for more ideas too if you get stuck.
Yeah. Any other questions in there?
Not right now. I'm just
mind if I throw in an idea?
Oh,
sure, Lynn. Yes.
You've probably tried this, but one of the best things that I've used with my own kids when they were younger was just a photo of just something that they did. If they were riding a bike, we would just have a photo, and I just say you could write about what's happening in the photo. You could write about what happened right before it, right after it. You could, connect photos. But it just seemed that, some of the pictures that my own kids would look at often, they were the ones that they like to write about most.
Mm.
Yeah, right.
And that visual representation is so helpful for them too, right?
Yeah. And that is the moment in time, right? That's that small moment that we always say to kids, write about that. And real life is probably the best place to start.
Any other questions that anyone wants to pop into our chat?
All right. Well,
it looks pretty quiet.
It's pretty quiet. So I guess we're done. And but we're never done. So what I suggest is if this webinar was helpful to you, please let me know, and we certainly can do more. I will be serving. You had enough surveys lately, but we will be sending out a survey again after Thanksgiving just to ask what other webinar subjects you'd like to have. We can certainly talk about anything that's of interest to you. We know that you are doing tremendous work with your kids at home, and we can't thank you enough. This remote learning is a new a new part of our society, and we know the burden it puts on you at home. And really, all of us, the teachers and myself and everyone on staff, appreciates and knows what you're doing, because they too are doing it at home as well. And so we are all in this together. We really appreciate you helping, especially our little K-1 students. We know that they need your help a lot, but we really appreciate what you're doing to support learning and to keep the ball rolling in this crazy pandemic. So from all of us, we thank you very much. And please reach out if you have any other questions or any other comments that you'd like to make. If you'd like more of this or something different, just please let me know. And I'd like to thank the teachers and Lynn Holcomb for coming for today's meeting, to be there to support you and support learning at home. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to Marco Taddy, behind the scenes IT person, for putting this all together as well. So we appreciate the support from central office. So good night, everyone. Thank you very much. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Bye-bye. Thanks, Marco.
No problem.